Names and faces, friends and places, years and moments half forgotten, laughs, fears, songs, tears, memories are made of this. I remember a time in Britain which only stamp collectors can look back upon with real appreciation. You see, for some months they'd been printing a special issue of stamps on which the head was the same as it had been for years, but the layout was new. Commemoration stamps for a Silver Jubilee. The celebration of the 25 years' reign of a king who had seen his people through the greatest war in history and the discouraging peace that followed. King George V and Queen Mary's Jubilee, a flag time, a bunting time that, alas, was to prove but the beginning of a much sadder story. Yes, Britain in 1936 was a land that had known a quarter of a century under the same king, in a world changing bewilderingly fast. 18 years of a peace, never really quite peaceful, one never really cloudless. And then...
This is London. Following bulletin was issued at 9:25. The King's life is moving peacefully towards its close.
Almighty God to call to his mercy our late sovereign lord King George V of blessed and glorious memory, that the high and mighty Prince Edward, Albert, Christian, George, Andrew, Patrick, David is now become our only lawful king, by the grace of God, of Great Britain, Ireland, and the British dominions beyond the seas, defender of the faith, Emperor of India.
So, after only a few months of printing, the dies were changed, and a new head appeared on the letters. And the spring and summer saw Edward VIII of England making his royal calls up and down the country, the figure of a monarch as yet uncrowned. Long live the king. In 1936, the streets couldn't be said to look very different from the way they do now. Though, I don't know. Perhaps there were a few subtle differences. The general atmosphere, the buses, the clothes, the hats, the outlines and appearance of the cars. Steam traction engines still hauling coal or beer. And then, of course, the trams. Many cities still have them, I know. But for London, they're now just a memory. A shilling all day, with all the bone shaking thrown in. Trams. And yet, TV. In 1936, the British Broadcasting Corporation opened the first television service in the world. A new medium for faces as well as voices.
Let's talk shop.
Tommy Handley and Ronald Frankau discussed the situation.
Let's talk about affairs of the world.
Ah, affairs of the world. Now, take the humming top.
What's that got to do with it?
Well, it's a world affair. Everything depends upon supply and demand.
Yeah.
You know what happens, for instance, when there's a failure in the sugar crop?
Yes.
What?
A lump comes in my throat.
Can you beat that?
Do you know, actually, Mr. Winterbottom, there's enough corn raised
To cover every toe in England. And that'll spoil the Pilgrim's Progress.
Well, that's Bunyan.
Yes,
Now, what I meant was, there's enough food for every man, woman, and child.
But is there food for thought?
With this elimination of the horse traffic, why, Leather sellers can't get a meal for a tanner.
And blacksmiths are working on the farms, shoeing geese.
It's propaganda that's wanted.
On the subject of horses, there were the usual crowds at Epsom that year, on Derby Day, which is the day to see everybody who loves a flutter. If not there in fact, they were there in spirit. Well, look at the list of jockeys. Big names then, if not today. That day, a horse broke the record for that grueling and highly contested classic. A record that at the time of my telling you, at any rate, still stands. A horse called Mahmud. His owner, the Aga Khan, went to lead in his champion with a beaming smile. So he was rich, we know. But even money can't always produce a Derby conqueror. Now, what else was in the news? In another part of England, a Mrs. Miles drew the King's bounty of £4 for producing quads. Another baby, aged 1 year, Edward, Nicholas, George, Paul, Patrick, with his parents, the Duke and Duchess of Kent. In the Netherlands, Princess Juliana announced her engagement to Prince Bernhard of Germany, a naturalized Dutch subject. A marriage that was to last in spite of preliminary opposition. In Berlin, an open Mercedes rolled through the streets towards the stadium specially built for the Olympic Games, bearing to the scene Germany's VIP of all VIPs. Then the torch arrived from Greece, and in the presence of Adolf Hitler, the flame was lit. The games were on. Flags flying together, the nation's athletes marching shoulder to shoulder, regardless of color or creed, binding the ties in a common bond of sportsmanship. Yes, it was all very hail fellow, well met. But when the doves of peace flew upwards over the Führer's head, it was into a sky not as cloudless as it might have been for such an occasion. For in the nearby demilitarized Rhineland, the tramp of soldiers' boots across the bridges had demonstrated to the world that Germany's VIP had an unusually vigorous mind. Afterwards, they found out that Hitler's troops had orders to withdraw at the first sign of opposition. Afterwards. So what, some said. After all, the Rhineland is Germany. But it wasn't exactly something to cheer about, not exactly another jubilee. Meanwhile, far away in Africa, the tramp of soldiers' feet again, oft-times bare. For a year, the drums had beat in Ethiopia, calling the tribesmen to the defense of their country. The battle was now nearly over, but though the end was near, morale was still high. March and train, march and countermarch, with spears, bows and arrows, antiquated rifles, muskets and shotguns. These pathetic weapons against a conqueror who had taken the sword to become, as he had claimed, Islam's protector. But Il Duce's protection meant for Ethiopia the onslaught of tanks, guns and bombing planes. And against such force, spears and courage were not enough. With the fall of his capital, Addis Ababa, Haile Selassie, the Lion of Judah, sought sanctuary in Britain. The world might deem Ethiopia none of its business, yet, like it or not, the presence of that dignified figure on English soil was a reminder to the world of its conscience.